Anarchism first came to Asia in the late 19th and early 20th century, and it had a great deal of success, well, a lot of members anyway. For instance, in Japan, there were a lot of groups formed. They even tried to overthrow the emperor at one point, but their numbers were dwindled down after a lot of their leaders were killed after the Great Kanto earthquake, because the government feared that anarchists could take advantage of the situation. Japanese anarchists, however, did help spread anarchism to Korea, where it found even more supporters. For instance, in Shinmin, a province in China, Korean anarchists set up a small anarchist society. Well, I say small, they ran schools, hospitals, and the likes, and they governed over 2 million people for a few years. But I am in China, specifically Yan'an, a spiritual home of communism. And although communism eventually won out in China, it was a relatively new concept to China at the time. And for a few decades in the early 20th century, anarchism really championed the cause of the working class. Now, you may think it's a little odd that China, who for millennia has been governed by emperors, would accept anarchism, but for a long time China had a concept called Wu Wei, and it's essentially small government. It comes from an old Taoist belief that harmony would be achieved by doing very little, and a lot of the emperors followed this belief when governing. In fact, in the early 18th century, French economists like Francois Quincey learned a lot from the Chinese and thought that a similar form of Oriental despotism would be best for Europe, and they were the ones who coined the term laissez-faire. So an early form of libertarianism was inspired by Chinese governments. Anyway, in the 1911 revolution, the anarchists, who were inspired by Russian anarchists, set up the Assassination Corps and began killing high-ranking Qing officials. And some anarchists, like Wang Jiwei, were also high-ranking people in the Tongming Way. This was a secret society that largely led the revolution and set up the government afterward. But after the revolution, the Chinese anarchists started working with the French and set up the Diligent Work Frugal Study movement, which allowed Chinese people to go study in France in exchange for working in a factory. Now, there were other programs like this, for instance the Boxer Indemnity Scholarship, but they sent people to go study in American universities, and I don't think it was as influential as the one that sent people to France. This is because the anarchists sent people to France who would become very important in the future, like Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping, and pretty much all the high-ranking communist officials except Mao. But through these, Mao learned about a lot of Marxist concepts like the dictatorship of the proletariat, something I guess the anarchists wouldn't have hoped for. But anarchists still had a profound impact on communist China. For instance, they had a concept known as New Culture. This is where they wanted to get rid of everything old in China, like the writing system, the patriarchy, and Confucian ideals. And of course, Mao would try to eradicate all these things during the Cultural Revolution.